Now 60 minutes after 7 o'clock in Antigua and Barbuda. This is your wake-up call. My name is Darren Matthew Ward. Very pleased to be in your company. And World Food Safety Day, WFSD, is celebrated annually on the 7th of June since 2019, with the aim of strengthening the message in the WFSD slogan, "The food safety is everybody's business." The 2023 theme, "Food Standards Save Lives," literally, serves also as a tribute to the Codex Alimentarius Commission, which celebrates 60 years of developing food standards, codes of practice, and guidelines for food safety. Wow, I hope someone is going to help me out with that word exactly and what it means. I'm looking forward to that very much. And our next guest is going to expand on that. But anyway, foodborne illnesses is usually an infectious or toxic in nature and often invisible to the plain eye. Food safety has a critical role in assuring that food stays safe at every stage of the food chain. There's an estimated 600 million cases of foodborne illnesses annually. That's a global figure. An estimated 420,000 people around the world die every year because of foodborne illnesses, most of those children, unfortunately. World Food Safety Day, as I mentioned, is on the 7th of June, that's tomorrow, and it aims to draw attention and to inspire action to prevent, detect, and manage foodborne risks. Joining us to expand on this discussion is the Manager for Information Services at the Antigua and Barbuda Bureau of Standards, Mrs. Solange Baptiste. Good morning, Solange.
Good morning.
And Miss Kelvin Spencer. She's a microbiologist from the Department of Analytical Services. I'm very grateful to have you here as well. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. So we're talking food safety. No, food safety concerns all of us because all of us have to eat in order to live, right?
Yes.
So let's first start with, I'm going to be mischievous here, the Codex Alimentarius Commission. What does that word mean, Solange? Help me out here.
Codex Alimentarius.
Okay, there we are.
Commission.
First correction. Yeah, tell us
is
about
the
that.
Latin for food code.
Okay.
Food code. And that essentially, it's a joint initiative between the UN organizations of the FAO and the WHO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, and the World Health Organization. You would have noted, I think, in the introduction that this commission, which is an international body or committee that works on setting standards for food safety, as well as guidelines for trade in food, because the Codex Alimentarius is actually one of the reference bodies within the WTO, the World Trade Organization, agreement on sanitary and phytosanitary measures. That just has to do with the health of humans, animals, plants, etc.
Okay. That
Right?
sounds like an all-encompassing situation.
Well, yes, but mainly to do with the health of these things.
Okay.
And of course, when it comes to the WTO, ensuring fair trading practices
Okay.
in the same.
Now, what agencies are responsible for food safety in Antigua and Barbuda?
Okay, so the Central Board of Health under the Ministry of Health is the competent authority. So World Food Safety Day is actually a collaboration between, if you look at it generically, it's between agriculture, health, and trade. But of course, as the national standards body, the Antigua and Barbuda Bureau of Standards is the national codex contact point. So we're the coordinating agency for this whole Codex Alimentarius stuff.
I'll get it straight by the end of the interview. Ms. Spencer, speak to us about your role at the Department of Analytical Services in the whole food safety process.
Okay, so let me first say what the Department of Analytical Services is. So it is a laboratory, it's a government laboratory. The administration, we are located at Dunbars. It's not too far from here. And then the lab itself is located at Point Wharf. And we mainly test food and water. We also do other types of samples such as soil, but our main services is food and water. So when it comes to food safety, we test food to make sure that they are safe for consumption.
Okay.
And of course, when you're using water, you have to make sure that they are free of contamination, because of course water can easily contaminate the food. So we also test water to make sure that they are free of contaminants.
Okay. How often do you test food, and how do you actually go about that process? I mean, do you just make spot checks at eateries and say, okay, I need a sample to test to see if there are contaminants? I don't know.
I would love if that was the case, but unfortunately, we are operating right now on a limited capacity because we're under renovations. So what it is that we offer a service, and there are specific clients that come to us for testing. Okay, so our clients range from catering businesses to hotels, and sometimes if somebody suspects that they've been poisoned, or they will bring their sample and we'll test. But of course, we always say that they should go through Central Board of Health. So it's mainly a service we offer to a particular range of clients.
Okay, so just to go through that process. So if I think I was food poisoned, chances are I would have probably already consumed the food. So there's a challenge there.
Yes, so there are times when they do have some of the food left back. Okay, so they will bring the food, but a lot of times we say, okay, you should go through Central Board of Health first, because if it is that they suspect that they went to a business and that business provided a food that made them sick, that is a potential problem to that business. So yes, they have to go to the regulatory body, which is Central Board of Health. We are just a lab. We just test the food and we give them the results.
So the person goes to CBH, makes the report, and then CBH relays that to you.
Yes, generally. But there are times when they do not know this and they do come to us. And we would advise them, but the right way really is to go to CBH.
To the CBH. Yes. Okay, all right, fair enough. Now, let's speak a little more about the Bureau of Standards, and its role and its work as it relates to food safety in Antigua and Barbuda.
Okay, so as mentioned before, the Bureau of Standards is the national codex contact point, and that just means that we are responsible for coordinating work as it pertains to, the work of this international body and incorporating it into the advancement of food safety and such in Antigua and Barbuda. So the Bureau of Standards also has a national Codex Food and Agriculture Technical Committee. So generally what we have done is morphed the work of Codex into the general work of that committee, right? So in that committee, we have what I would consider a comprehensive representation of all the agriculture, health, and in some ways, consumer. We always have consumer representatives on our technical committees, as well as private sector. So the committee has a number of agriculture and health agencies represented, and they would come together to look at maybe if, let's say, for example, there's a particular standard that is being developed right now in the Codex, and we see it as necessary and important for Antigua and Barbuda's food safety system, for example. We would also make sure that committee has full exposure to the documentation, to provide comments, to elaborate, and also, what is especially important, to bring any specific nuances that may be particular for Antigua and Barbuda's food safety system or trade in food, etc., that might need to be taken into account.
And I'll be devil's advocate here. Can you think of the listeners and viewers can see you. Anyway, can you give a practical example of a recent situation where a codex standard was applied to the food process here in Antigua and Barbuda?
Well, labeling.
Labeling? Okay.
Yes. So there is currently in process, there are two that come to mind. There's labeling and there's also food hygiene.
Okay.
Right? So, but for the labeling standard, there is currently a process or a deliberation about front of package labeling in terms of nutritional inferences, right? About the foods that are packaged. Actually, Ms. Spencer could probably do a more comprehensive job in speaking about that, given her experience with it. But that is a typical example. So one of the nuances with that particular issue is that around the world there's so many differing views as to what is best, what works best, what is more noticeable. Then you would have the private sectors looking at the expense and what they might consider the malefacts on the uptake of their product based on some of these things. So it has been a long discussion and it is ongoing, but this is typical. So for Antigua and Barbuda, there would be policies pertaining to especially the reducing the incidence of non-communicable diseases. And so the nutritionists and those advocates for that particular cause would be very much concerned and have been weighing in, quite ardently on what they think would be suitable for Antigua and Barbuda, because they want to make sure that we're not stymieing efforts for our best health and well-being.
Okay,
right?
Understood. And perhaps a practical, as you mentioned, non-communicable. Someone with diabetes or hypertension, they're going to want to know the content of sugar or the content of sodium. Or
I was saying fats and
or fats as well.
Content.
Correct. Or and that's where the labeling is so important.
Yes.
Okay. You wanted to append to that?
No, I was going to say that in recent years, especially during COVID, a lot of persons have developed their own businesses and got into entrepreneurship. And so what we found is that a lot of persons have been coming to the lab and requiring testing for nutritional values, and because they want to market their products and put them on the shelves. But unfortunately at this time, the lab is not able to do that. So a lot of times they're a bit disappointed. But we're hoping in the future that we can include that.
That's my next question, right? How soon the lab going to be back up?
Advancement.
As
that's
soon as they would
That's the $64,000 question.
Yes, maintaining the lab is very expensive. I would say that. And my director, Dr. Christian, he works extremely hard. He goes above and beyond, and he believes in the staff, but it does cost a lot to maintain a lab. I think when I go into a little bit detail in terms of what we do in the lab and how we test, you would see that it really can be expensive.
Very well, and we're going to expand on that right after we share these very important messages from our partners here at Twin Island Media. More wake-up call with our special guests. Speaking about food safety, Mrs. Solange Baptiste, Manager of Information Systems, Bureau of Standards, and Kelvin Spencer, microbiologist, sound bright, from the Department of Analytical Services. We're going to delve into the microbiology of food safety right after this.
This is the talk of Antigua and Barbuda. Twin Island Media, 94.1 FM.
It's now 7:33 in St. John's, Antigua. This is your wake-up call presented by Twin Island Media on 94.1 FM, streaming on Facebook Live, and I'm happy to say also we are streaming on the TuneIn app. You just search for Twin Island Media for all you tune-in heads, so to speak. All right, we're having a conversation about food safety. Tomorrow is World Food Safety Day, the 7th of June, and we're speaking about the issue of food safety with Mrs. Solange Baptiste, Manager of Information Services at the Antigua Barbuda Bureau of Standards, and Kelvin Spencer, microbiologist at the Department of Analytical Services. Now, what we want to get into at this point in time is I want to ask the microbiologist among us, there's only one in studio, how many microbiologists we have in Antigua?
As far as Dr. Christian is the main expert. I actually looked up to him, and I've been under him for about 10 years.
Right.
And there's different varying levels of microbiology. I'm mainly with food and water, and then you have clinical microbiology. So there should be a microbiologist at the hospital.
Okay.
So I can't give you an exact number.
Right, I understand. But there are not many. Y'all are not a
No,
dime a dozen
no.
all over the place. All right, understood. Very important role. Speak to us about your role in the context of ensuring food safety. And you see you have you took some copious notes here. And so if you could just run through that for our listeners so that they can have an appreciation for your role in the context of ensuring food safety in Antigua and Barbuda.
Okay, so as a food microbiologist, my role is to test the food that comes to the lab. Okay, so first we have to address how food becomes contaminated. Okay, you have food handlers, if they're not practicing good personal hygiene when they handle the food, that's one way. Handling pets, raw food, not washing their hands after going to the bathroom, and they're handling the food, that's one way. Temperature abuse, not cooking food correctly to the right temperature, not storing food correctly, and using contaminated water. Okay, so that's one way they get contaminated. Now, the specific bacteria that causes the foodborne illness. Now, there's a wide range of pathogens, but the specific ones we test at the lab, they include, okay, maybe some may not know, but I think some listeners would know about E. coli maybe and salmonella. I'm sure you've heard salmonella. That's with poultry and eggs. Then you have staphylococcus, which is normally due to persons we naturally carry stuff on our skin. And so you also have listeria, which is generally contaminate cold cuts and salads, and that one is a very nasty pathogen because that can cause miscarriages. And then you have Bacillus cereus, which is normally found in soil. And then once those bacteria is in the food now, when they're at the lab, we use what we call culture media to grow the bacteria. And then they can, depending on media, they appear in all these different shapes and colors. And then when we see them on the culture media, we can say, okay, this bacteria is in the food.
So if I get food poison, and so we locally refer, you get food poison, and we have a sample of the food. We take it to CBH. CBH then sends it to you, and you do what?
Yes, we put it on the culture media. It's actually a very long process. It depends on the bacteria that we're looking for. For example, listeria takes up to 2 weeks. There's different steps that we'd have to do to confirm listeria is there. Because if listeria is there, like I mentioned before, there's a high implication. Okay, so we have to do various what we call confirmation tests to make sure that listeria is there. So, and all these culture media can be very expensive. Okay, so that's one way that we...
So when you confirm that this food does have any one of these pathogens, right, what happens then?
Then we alert the client, and if depending on where this food came from, we have to alert the Central Board of Health, because they would have to do an investigation into the food business, because finding some of these specific pathogens, like I said, has a high implication.
How long has the lab been operating on a reduced basis?
On a reduced base, well, since COVID really. But before that, we didn't have that many clients. It's only in recent years we started to have more clients to help generate revenue so that we can further expand.
Okay. Tell us about local food production, Solange. The production of food. What if local farmers produce, vegetables or meat, for that matter, and they are suspected for some form of foodborne illnesses?
I would not have that information, unfortunately. If we had maybe health inspector or, Ms. Martin or somebody here, they could definitely speak to that. However, what I would like to say and otherwise advocate or promote on that measure is this whole matter of, we're speaking about food standards. That group of standards called good agricultural practices is vital for food production, both for produce as well as the animal husbandry and meat production.
So how do you communicate these standards to the parties, like the farmers, both the crop and livestock farmers? How do you communicate these standards to them? Or is there a channel of communication?
So there, department, the extension division in agriculture, they are typically the ones to interact with the farmers and to give guidance on these measures and these types of these practices. In terms of establishing these as national standards and so forth, that is a process that I think we would be, if some are not already there, this is something that can be done again through that national technical committee. Nevertheless, these practices are definitely promoted through the Agricultural Extension Division, and once they are implemented, you would have, for example, the safe water being used for growing crops and so forth, because when you think about it, that is how sometimes we would have heard of things like contaminated lettuce and so on from imported produce and so forth on these huge farms, acres and acres and acres. These huge farms but
traceability is usually in place.
Yes,
do we have traceability issues in Antigua?
Well, system-wise, yes, but I know for a fact that is something the Ministry of Agriculture is working on. It is definitely a current conversation, and so you would have heard of that agriculture, health, and food safety policy. So all of these things are definitely on the table for to be dealt with and to be otherwise built out for more robust food safety systems.
Okay. Now, as it relates to food some food can actually kill you. What are some of the practices that we should engage in consistently, especially those in the food business, to ensure food safety? Because everybody has an interest in food safety. Those who cook food and sell, whether restaurants or the cook shops, quote unquote, street vendors, as well as, of course, the consumers. They definitely have an interest.
Yes. So basically, food safety is everyone's concern. So we all play a part from farm to table. Okay. So when we want to ensure food safety, there's four aspects we need to remember. It is clean, cause contamination, cook, and chill. Basically, with clean, ensure that you practice good personal hygiene. Cause contamination, separate raw foods and cooked foods. Chill, storing food at the proper temperature. And then we have cook, which is cooking food to the right temperature to kill the pathogens. Okay, so once you follow those four main factors, you should have food that are safe for human consumption. I don't want to say fully safe, because in science you can't always say 100%, but I would say it is safe for consumption based on the standards.
All right. Why did you become a microbiologist?
Why?
I should have asked you that first, but I'm curious.
Personally, I actually, when I went to UE, I actually had no idea what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to do biology. And one of the courses had microbiology as a subsection. And as I was learning, I realized, wow, this is very interesting. Right. And then when I went to UE in Cave Hill and I started to do food microbiology, I realized that, okay, this is actually really interesting. And also there's not much expertise in it. And then when I started to work at the department and working on the Dr. Christian, who I look up to a lot, I started to realize the need. Yes. I realized the need of expertise in it. And so about 2 years ago, I did my master's in food safety, agri-food safety business, because UE is trying to build the expertise in the Caribbean. Yes, there's not much focus on food safety. We tend to not value it. We kind of
take it for granted.
Yes, take it for granted, exactly.
All right. What's going to be the focus for World Food Safety Day tomorrow? Is there going to be any specific activity that the public should be aware of?
Well, I would, of course, we'll have other media encounters. And specifically in terms of the media encounters, we have a special feature on Thursday evening with another media house on a program called Wellness Corner. And interesting thing with that is that we're actually hoping to have a medical practitioner in as well, so that the public can hear about, what the actual health impacts are on, the human being with, the food safety concerns and so forth, the pathogens and what they do or what they can do. Spencer would have alluded to a little of that earlier, and I think it's definitely of serious concern. Other than that, our stakeholders in the Central Board of Health, they're going to be doing a mock supermarket between 9 and 12 tomorrow at, I think, 3 locations, outside Chase, outside Epicurean, and at Wood Center, I think, somewhere between Cosborough and Price Chopper, around there. And the intent of that is so that consumers can be informed, given that hands-on information as to how to make safe food purchases. Now, of course, your food purchases are not just prepackaged goods, but there are points about the prepackaged goods as well as fresh foods to be noted, and so we certainly extend an open invitation to all consumers who are going to be in these areas to take a stop, get educated, at least top up on your education and your awareness on these ideas. Be reminded, because as we say, it's something we tend to take for granted. And as somebody who has actually myself been the quote unquote victim of, and this is self-induced, self-induced, some form of food poisoning, where I was developing a bad allergic reaction to something that I afterwards realized was actually expired. So I really encourage persons know how to identify your safe food, and so take advantage of that opportunity with our partners from the Central Board of Health. What am I missing? Apart from that, well, Ms. Spencer would have developed this lovely poster that we would want to, share via social media.
Very quickly. We can we have it electronically that we could share?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't hear, but we can provide it.
Food Standards Save Lives, Department of Analytical Services, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Agriculture, Trade, and Barbuda Affairs. And they have all the how food becomes contaminated, common culprits, and lab diagnosis. All right, so hopefully we'll get this electronically so that we can share it to our Facebook page. Here at Twin Island Media, we'll be happy to do that. I didn't even get into any data, local data, as how many incidents of food poisoning we have in Antigua. Is such data available?
I actually did a research project, part of my
You have
master's.
half a second. Go ahead, tell me, real quick.
Based on the food service establishments I looked at, about 30% conform to the food standards I used. So it was a low percentage. So
only 30% conform to food standards?
Yeah, it was mainly for one particular food service establishment.
Yeah.
But you can tune into the next program that will be on Thursday, and I'll speak more on it.
Speak more on that. All right, no problem. Thanks so much. I want to thank you both for joining us this morning. Manager of Information Services at the Antigua and Barbuda Bureau of Standards, Mrs. Solange Baptiste, and Kelvin Spencer, microbiologist at the Department of Analytical Services, whose boss is Dr. Lenroy Christian. She mentioned him several times. Thank you so much. Good morning, Lenroy. Have a great day, all of you, and I hope that you have a successful day tomorrow as we focus on food safety.